Hi, I'm Jono, and if you're new here, I do pencil drawings. I've been getting a lot of requests on my Patreon page to do a bit of a walkthrough through parts of the section of one of my drawings. So I thought I'd share that with you guys. I want to take you through how I drew the hand on the drawing harm. And yeah, I'll just go step by step as I'm drawing and explain a bit of the thought process through some of that drawing and some of the techniques that I'm using. Also, a huge thank you to Squarespace for sponsoring this video. Okay, so starting out, I've already mapped out most of the proportions of the hand. I used the grid method in this drawing, so I had my reference image and a small, very light grid over my drawing. This method has really helped me save time and not second guess all of my proportions, but now I still need to render all the details and get the tones right. So the first thing I'm doing is just kind of mapping out where my shadows are going to be and where my highlights are going to be. I'm just using a 2B mechanical pencil. It's a 0.7mm, so it's actually a little bit thicker than usual, which allows me to just map out more area quite quickly. What I like about using this pencil is that it leaves enough graphite for me to manipulate it, but it doesn't leave too much to the point that I can't erase it easily. So if I don't like some of the shading that I've done, I can very easily erase it without it being a permanent mark. I'm moving over to an 8B pencil now, and I just want to define the lines on the outside a little bit more so that I don't lose them when I shade over. Going back to the 0.7mm, I'm just using this to define more of the details and mark out where I want the nails to lie. I'm eventually going to go over all of this pencil work with cotton wool and soften a lot of the individual strokes. But before then, I really want to try and get my cross-hatching looking as smooth as possible, just so that I can get the most accurate representation of how the shadows are going to look. At this stage, I'm using mostly two values to determine my shadows. I've got my deep shadows, which are in the center almost of the finger, and then I've got my reflected shadows, which are slightly lighter than my deeper shadows. Often people will say block out entirely, so you just have two tones, which is really useful, but I generally just feel a bit more comfortable having two tones in my shadows, and then my highlights I leave white. I'm starting to warm up a little bit more at this stage, and I'm feeling a lot more confident with my work, so I'm starting to block off a lot more areas with just two tones. I've got my darker lines, which I don't want to lose when I shade, and then I'm planning on working back into it with cotton wool to get a nice even tone in the shadows. You can see how moving over it with the cotton wool very quickly and simply gives you a nice transition from the shadow to the highlight in the fingers. I then just start to repeat this process of applying graphite, making sure my lines are darker than my shadows so that I don't lose them, and then I'll go back in with cotton wool or a blending stump. As I'm warming up and getting more confident, I'm starting to work more and more freely. This is a challenge for me every single day. I start off feeling a little bit nervous about making mistakes, and as I start going, I develop a bit of confidence and then just start working a little bit quicker. And now again, I'm just applying graphite with a pencil. I prefer doing it this way rather than dipping the cotton wool into the graphite powder, because I can control the amount of graphite that gets put onto the page. If I were to just dip the cotton wool straight into the powder, my very first connection with the paper will be quite dark, and I want to be able to have a uniform tone all the way across. Now I'm using my blending stump, which is already pre-saturated with graphite. I've used this stump on some of my other drawings already, so it's got a bit of graphite stuck in the nib, and I can use this actually to draw with. The benefit of this is that there's no harsh lines. If I want to erase, it can erase quite smoothly. And if I'm trying to draw wrinkles with this, I can apply pressure on the one side of the tip of the blending stump and almost have it taper off, so you automatically get a shade when you apply with the blending stump. Okay, and now I'm busy using a makeup tool that I found really useful. For some reason, this gives me a beautifully soft finish, and I really enjoy using this to kind of just mark out slightly darker areas. The primary reason I'm using the blending stump to get the lines of the wrinkles is because these wrinkles are not harsh lines, they're actually just shadows. But when we draw these kinds of things with harsh lines, that's what makes it look less refined. You can see quite clearly here the difference in textures. You can see where I've drawn just with pencil and the kind of finish that gets. You can see where I've worked in cotton wool, and then lastly now you can see how shading with the blending stump is actually slightly different, and it's almost a middle ground between the drawing with pencil and the shading with cotton wool. Working with my 8B, especially in creases like this, I'm continuously thinking of how hard I'm pressing. So I'm trying not to press hard. The pressure that I use is in relation to how much graphite I think I'm going to want to put onto the paper. If I want to have quite a soft shade, I'm going to actually apply quite a bit of graphite. So I'll push a little bit harder and then be able to pull that graphite out with a blending stump later on. Something you might notice here is that I'm not just drawing the crease as one hard line. I'm avoiding that very strong, harsh line, and one of the ways that I do that is by drawing perpendicular to the crease. And this just helps me get a little bit more of a natural look. Often in skin texture and stuff, we want to avoid these very harsh lines. We're mostly working with shadows, and to depict a shadow with a very harsh line, it's not going to look as realistic, and you lose some of the subtleties. With the creases in the hand, it's important to try and avoid straight lines. Often that's going to curve and follow the contours of the muscles in the hands. So most of the creases are going to have a slight curve to them. There's also a lot of these interlocking diamond kind of shapes. So if you can, try and identify the pattern that the creases in the skin take, and then include that pattern in your texture. Another thing to consider is where the light is coming from. So in this case, the light is coming from the top of the hand, so from the wrist side. And that means that all the lines that I draw, I'm going to have a shadow going on the top side. I know it sounds counterproductive, but the creases in this case are indents. And when the creases are indents, then the shadow will actually be above towards the side of the light, almost creating that sense of flesh bulging over and falling into the crease. Okay, so now I'm using the makeup tool again, and I've dipped it in a little bit of linseed oil, and I'm using graphite mixed with linseed oil to get that darker value that matches the background a little bit more. It's very risky to work with this because the linseed oil is much more of a permanent medium, so I need to work very cautiously, and I can't erase it as easily, so yeah, I just work with it very sparingly. I'm going to be working a lot more with my eraser now. Another thing to bear in mind is if there's a harsh light, the highlight will actually have quite sharp edges. So as you can see on the ring finger, there's just a spot of highlight, and that kind of gives the illusion of the skin being slightly more shiny or the light being slightly harsher. As you can see, I've got a harsh line, and then I'm going to shade above the line to try and get the sense of the crease and the volume of the muscles as they're folding around the hand. I'm bringing in my Tombow Mono Zero eraser here. I love this little tool. It's really great for very fine little lines and creases. So I'm going to be adding some detail to the second bit of flesh. I'm not going to add just a straight line. That often looks artificial. So I'm more just dotting these highlights, and it gives the sense that there's a little bit more texture and a bit of a wave to the way that the muscle is pulling out of the crease. I'm working so carefully with this kneadable eraser. The technique of just moving over in layers with a little bit of graphite and the cotton wool means that the graphite is actually sitting very softly on the top of the paper, so you can remove it so easily with an eraser. I'm following the same principle now with the creases in the thumb. I know that the light is coming from the top, so I know that the creases will have their shadow on the top side of the line. I'm working really, really carefully here not to have any strong, harsh lines. Everything here is very delicate and mostly working with shadows, and these shadows are not stark shadows, they're just very soft ones. So I'm trying to cover any harsh pencil lines with my blending stump. There's a lot of space here to just let the kneadable eraser make the marks. So you can draw a bunch of kind of cross-hatched or diamond-shaped lines to illustrate these creases, following the flow and the curvature of the muscles in the hand, and then use your eraser to kind of pick them out and see if it makes sense. I can see that the midtones of the thumb are a little bit too light, so I'm going to try and darken the whole thing, but I think that the midtones actually suit the tone of my highlight, so using the makeup tool, bring in the shadow and have a very smooth transition right up to that midtone and have almost a sliver down the center of the thumb. I'm just working along the entire length of the thumb now and softening all of the lines on that side. Because the thumb is facing the body itself, it's going to be slightly in shadow. There's a bit of reflected light here, but I can very comfortably darken all of these and know that it's going to look more natural having the highlights closer to the center of the thumb and the muscle. Well, I've lost the thumbnail mostly, so I'm just going to outline it a bit with my 2B mechanical pencil, and then I think I'm going to try and highlight it here just to bring back the nail. And then finally, I'm just going to use my stencil to protect the drawing that I've done, and then get a nice shadow for the transition between where the hand touches the side of the thigh. This is going to make the hand stand out quite a bit. Its shadows are just so important. It's an amazing way to create the illusion of something just looking a lot more real and having a lot more volume. And there we go. Yeah, just finishing up, cleaning up, doing some shadows on the side of the leg where the hand is touching it. And overall pretty happy with how this hand came out. It was really fun to draw. And yeah, there was a lot of really nice creases and things that I could really sink my attention into. Before I end this video, I just want to give a shout out to this video sponsor, Squarespace. They've helped me out in a huge way, not only in sponsoring the majority of my videos and helping me sustain this channel, but also early on in my career, they made it so easy for me to create an online portfolio and to create a platform to make it easy for clients to find. It's so important if you're a creative to have that kind of space, to have a platform where you can showcase your work and where people can get in touch with you very easily. And for me, I felt that Squarespace did that effortlessly. I never had to patch or upgrade anything. I could register a domain with them or set up an online store. And most importantly, I could design a portfolio and show my work the way that I wanted to. Also, every time I got stuck, their amazing support team helped me out instantly. So if you're looking at building a website, give Squarespace a try. And if you decide that you love them, use this offer code and get 10% off your first purchase. So there we go. I hope you guys found this video helpful, or at the very least just entertaining. If you did, leave a like. It helps the channel out in a massive way. If you have any more questions about my techniques, please let me know in the comments. I'd love to try and answer them. And as always, thanks for the support, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.